Well, the Oscar nominations came out this morning, so we figured we would get together and we would talk about it. Plugged In has reviewed most of the movies that have been nominated.
Yeah.
So, we would get together. We'd talk about the nominations, have a nomination conversation.
Just a little nomination conversation.
Yeah, and so, Paul, you have reviewed a number of the films on, especially the Best Picture list for nominations, right?
Yeah, and that's what we're really focusing in on, I would say. And we have reviewed pretty much everything on the Best Picture list, I believe.
Yep, I think there's only one, maybe.
So we've got 10 nominees this year. They sort of fluctuate between 5 and 10, right?
Yep.
And so the nominees for Best Picture are Anora, The Brutalist, A Complete Unknown, Conclave, Dune Part 2, Emilia Perez, I'm Still Here, Nickel Boys, The Substance, which was a surprise, and Wicked.
Yes. So we reviewed all of those except for I'm Still Here, but we are looking probably look to get to that one. So.
Yeah. That is a Brazilian movie that sort of slid under the radar. It didn't even come to where we are in Colorado until just recently.
Also nominated.
I'm not even sure.
Also nominated for International Picture. Yeah.
And that's one thing that I noticed about this slew of nominations is that it's becoming increasingly international. Emilia Perez is another movie that is also up for Best International Film.
Yep, that's right.
One of my favorite movies in the animated category, Flow, is Latvian. It's a foreign language film technically, even though it doesn't have any actual language in it at all. It's a silent movie. So you are seeing a lot more international flavor as the Oscars have gone on. Really, this is a trend that we've seen the last several years.
Yeah, I think that's pretty cool. You're just getting kind of different voices coming in. Now, the content issues and things like that, certainly on some of these movies. So speaking to that, what have you seen that stuck out in the list, at least the Best Picture list, in terms of maybe some themes that stuck out to you?
So it's an interesting year. Mm-hmm. I found it interesting that there were a lot of movies, and if you have kids watching, you might want to turn away or whatnot, but a lot of the movies that were nominated have a lot of sensual, sexual themes to them. Right, you're talking about Anora, which is about a sex worker who marries a Russian oligarch.
Right.
You have Conclave, which is wrapped up in how the Catholic Church is dealing with human sexuality. Mm-hmm. You have Emilia Perez, which features a trans actor who was nominated actually in the Best Actress category.
It's about gender reassignment, sex change,
correct.
surgery.
Yeah. That's a huge theme in this movie. So you have a lot of those themes, more than I remember actually in the past, where a lot of these very prominent movies have these really tawdry themes, I would say. I mean, for Anora, for instance, this was a tricky movie for us to review because oftentimes we do not review things that really just feel far out of bounds.
Gratuitous.
Right. And this felt like it was right on the edge of what we would cover.
Yeah.
Because of the buzz, because we knew that this day was going to be coming.
Right.
We felt like we really needed to see what it had. And a lot of these movies contain some extreme sexual content. The Substance, which I mentioned was a surprise to me that it got nominated for Best Picture. I've been talking around the office about how this is one of the craziest movies I have ever seen. And I have seen some really strange movies.
Right,
but there is a lot of skin involved with this, as well as a lot of blood. So that's one of the things that I've noticed.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. As I was looking through the list, I actually thought the list was kind of like, would Google AI say Plugged In would recommend this family friendly? Not to get too much into that.
Back to a video that we did just a few days ago.
Right. But a lot of R-rated movies. But the few PG movies, there are a couple PG movies as well, including Conclave. And I thought that's kind of odd. Conclave getting a PG rating, so people may be thinking, "Oh, this is safe for families and everything like that." But there are some, as you mentioned, there are some serious themes when it comes to sexual identity and the Catholic Church and conservative Christian, values and how we view sexuality and sexual identity. There's a lot there.
Yeah.
Skewed in a certain direction, I would say.
Skewed in a certain direction. I think that's fair. And that really emphasizes one of the reasons why Plugged In exists, really, in that the ratings don't tell you everything that you necessarily need to know about a movie. Right. Conclave, it takes place within the Vatican.
Yep.
These are all cardinals. These are all archbishops.
If they're choosing a new pope.
They're not going to be swearing. They're not going to be hitting each other in the face, right?
Right.
But
one would think.
But the themes for a lot of families, they're just a little bit out of bounds.
Yep.
And then when you look at the other PG movie, Wicked, that has its own set of issues, right? We've been dealing with navigating that review on our site, actually, because it has some very spiritually intense issues for a lot of our families, even though it's also one of the most popular musicals of all time.
Right. Exactly.
So it's an interesting vibe. One thing that I noted about this is that we actually had an even split of R movies and not R movies.
Okay.
There were 5 R-rated movies that were nominated for Best Picture, 5 that were PG-13 or below.
Or PG, okay.
So I found that was pretty interesting. The R-rated movies seemed like they were harder R than we've seen in the past. The Substance is a great example of that.
Right, Nora.
Yeah. So
absolutely.
you did have these R-rated movies that were in some ways a little bit beyond the pale of what we've seen before in these Oscar nominees.
Yeah, absolutely. And a mix of, again, kind of modern setting and going back in the past a little bit. A Complete Unknown is a biopic about Bob Dylan.
Yeah.
Specifically, The Brutalist is about what is that? I think it's set in the 40s. I think that's post-World War II.
Yeah, so it is set post-World War II, and it takes place over a long period of time. And fittingly, it's a very long movie. It's almost 4 hours long, which is...
You were telling me, it had an intermission, right?
They brought back the intermission
what movie,
just for The Brutalist.
What movie nowadays has an intermission? The Brutalist.
Yeah. So if you go to The Brutalist, be prepared to sit for a while. That's the message of that. But yeah, you did have a very retro vibe for this. And I do think that you do see a lot of movie creators. They're turning back to the past. The Brutalist is entirely made up. It's a fictional story.
Oh,
but you
really?
do have these they're turning back to the past because they like the vibe, they like the feel, and I totally get that.
Sure. And then another movie that was nominated for Best Picture, Dune Part 2.
Which is not set in the past, although it sort of is.
I don't think it's a long time ago in a galaxy far away. I think it's set in the future, but Dune Part 2, which has a lot of depth, complexity, especially as it relates to spiritual, political messages as well. And actually, you and Adam had a conversation about that actually will be coming out soon.
Yeah, I'm really super excited about that. Adam Holtz and I, we actually sit down and we talk about Dune Part 2. That'll be coming out probably within the next few days,
Yeah, pretty soon.
So be looking at that because it really does have some very, very interesting messages. It is... For a long time, they thought that Dune was not able to be made into a movie because it's just too dense, too complex.
Right.
But honestly, when you're looking at this list, technically, Dune Part 2 is one of my favorites on this list, actually. They did what they did with it well.
Mine too. Not a perfect movie content-wise, but they did do it very, very well, and a lot of good issues to kind of chew through. So I really wanted to ask you... the best animated feature nominees.
I'm so glad you asked.
I just want to know what you would choose. So to touch on this, we have Wallace and Gromit, Vengeance Most Foul.
Which you've seen.
Which I have seen.
And you loved.
I loved it. A movie you loved.
Yes.
Flow, which you mentioned, a Latvian movie, no dialogue.
No dialogue.
A movie you loved. Inside Out 2. Sequel to Pixar movie, great Pixar movie. Sequel to a movie you loved and a movie that you love. And then we had finally The Wild Robot.
Right.
Which is a movie that you absolutely loved.
Yeah. So when I look at the nominees, The Best Picture nominees feel a little bit flat to me. Like I look at that list and I'm not seeing anything that I thought, oh, that definitely deserves it.
Right,
Either from
right.
certainly not from a plugged in perspective, but even from a cinematic standpoint, I'm thinking a lot of those movies fall a little bit short, I think.
Yeah.
But when I look at the animated movies this year, oh my goodness. I thought it was a really, really strong year for it.
So what
And
would you pick?
that is
I'm
such
putting
a
you on the
good
spot
question.
right now.
Wow, this is really scary. So I'll tell you what.
Paul Acey, voice of the Academy.
I loved The Wild Robot.
Yes.
Right? It has some great messages about motherhood, about acceptance. It has some fantastic visuals, and I talked with the director, which doesn't bias me at all for this.
Chris Sanders, yes.
Chris Sanders. So you can hear it on a past podcast. It was a really fun conversation with him. But when I saw Flow, I thought, oh man, this is so creative. It's really about this
Really?
cat going on this boat with a bunch of other animals,
Yep.
including a capybara. Who knew that capybaras could be so cute? They were, and it really, even though there's no dialogue whatsoever, even though we're talking about a bunch of animals, it has some really deep themes, if you will. And the artistry, much like Wild Robot, is just spot on. I mean, there are images that will make you, and you're kind of an artist, so I really think that you would love this movie just to see what they do visually with it. Really strong.
I'm excited to see it. It is a stacked category. And we should mention there is one other movie in that category. I think it's called Journey of a Snail.
Yeah, memoirs maybe of a
A
snail.
memoir of a snail. And so that's one that, I mean, I don't think Plugged In has done a review.
No,
before.
no,
That's
we will
one
have
that-
it. We will have a review up before the Oscars go. I promise.
But it's
it
got
is-
a hard road. If you're rooting for Memoirs of a Snail,
it's a stack. Category.
it's a stacked category.
So
It's
to
a hard
answer
road,
your
so.
to answer your question,
Yes.
because I sort of waffled and I was thinking as you was talking, I do think I would still go The Wild Robot.
Okay, all
The
right.
themes there are just so strong. The movie
Yeah.
is put together so well. So
Beautiful movie, beautiful
Yeah.
movie. So speaking of, going back to what you said about the animated films, right? There's really been, it seems like there's really been a shift over time where if you look in the past, I think a lot of people would consider, classic Disney and Pixar as really
Right.
the only kind of animated features that had really any significant depth, anything really to say,
Right.
right? That feels like it's changed a lot and grown a lot, where animated features now really can be some of the most powerful movies that we have coming out.
Well, for my money, they really are. I think honestly, when it comes to this time of year, I often feel like animated movies do not get the recognition that they deserve. Because when you're talking about some of the powerful themes that you want to see in a well-crafted movie,
Sure,
when
yeah.
you want to see that character development that you want to see,
Yes.
I honestly think that animated movies oftentimes do that more effectively than live action these days.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, what best picture nominee this year has such a great message about motherhood
Right.
compared to like
exactly.
Wild Robot or something like that?
Exactly. You have these strong messages in stories that are beautifully told. They are really effective vehicles. And I think that there's still sort of this holdover where you look at some of these movies and you think, oh, that is a kid's movie. Right. And yeah, they're appropriate for
Right.
children.
It has the
some families.
trappings of it. Yeah.
Always check out the plugged in review before you go, turn it on for your fam,
Definitely.
because you never know. But when you do look at these animated movies, they tend to be more navigable. They tend to be more all age appropriate.
Sure.
That doesn't mean that it's a lesser movie than something like a Nora or Amelia Perez. It just means that the messages are more open to all. And I think that
Absolutely.
that's really a powerful thing. I wish that Hollywood would sort of embrace that sensibility. Just because a story doesn't come with a lot of content doesn't mean it's a lesser story. Oftentimes when you look at Flow, when you look at The Wild Robot, the stories work better.
Right.
Because they're designed for a wider audience, I think.
Well, and I would even say just because you feel good at the end of the movie, that really doesn't lessen its value in what it's trying to say. You can still be really impacted by a story like that, right?
Well,
That's
yeah.
coming up, talking about really strong, true themes that we see and we feel. And I do wish that some of the
Yeah.
like Best Picture nominees that we were seeing leaned more in that direction, right? You know, there's something to be said for difficult stories, right? We were talking about a prior year's nomination that you really liked, Zone of Interest, which is a very difficult story. I mean, it's a family living next to Auschwitz, right, in World War II. So that's like serious business, right? So you can have stories like that that are meaningful and very impactful, but I don't think it should come at the expense of feel-good stories or stories that really hit on truths that are very, very positive.
I think a great example of it this year is the movie The Brutalist, right? This is an R-rated movie. It's 4 hours long, as we've talked about. It is a movie that, as a critic, as someone who's seen a lot of movies, I can appreciate. I appreciate the quality that goes into the creation of something like this. This is a cinematic work that is pretty impressive, right? From a technical point of view. As a moviegoer, when I go to a movie, I want to feel. I want to love. I want to feel better when I walk out of a theater. I want to feel inspired to be a better father, a better husband, a better friend. You know, and when you look at some of these movies, The Wild Robot, when I think about just the power that brings you and just sort of that sense of the themes of sacrifice, the themes of motherhood, those are strong messages that, you know, even now
presented very honestly.
Presented very honestly. Even when I'm talking about it, it makes me smile. It chokes me up a little bit because those messages are so strong.
Absolutely.
You know, and that's the power of cinema. That's one of the reasons why we have gotten into what we do. We love the power of story. And that power of story at its best makes us better.
Yeah. All right. Well, that seems like a good place to end it. Thank you so much for joining us for this Oscar nominations conversation. Let us know in the comments what you thought about the Oscar nominations. Did you see a movie that you really loved that wasn't represented, or are you happy with some of the choices on there? Definitely subscribe to our YouTube videos. That way, when we have more conversations like this, you can be notified as well. And again, definitely leave comments. Let us know what you thought, and we'll see you next time.